Thank you very much. Surprised that anybody remembers the role that I took on the strike committee at Columbia. And I don't know that I was the most conservative member, but I was one of the leaders of the right wing of the strike committee. And the issue that made us the right wing was there were actually two strikes at Columbia. The first one was the boycott, was the sit-ins, the occupation of the buildings. And I came back. I was off campus most of the year campaigning for Gene McCarthy in New Hampshire, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. I probably would have flunked out if it hadn't been for the strike. But the Pennsylvania primary was, I think, April 23rd. I came back that night, and the strike started that day. It took me a couple of days to figure out what was going on. But that was the first strike, the occupation of the buildings, and then there was a police bust, and then there was a second strike. And I was elected to the strike committee for the second strike. And the second strike was a boycott of classes. And the key question on the strike committee that divided the right from the, I won't say from the left, but from the SDS and the fellow travelers of the SDS, was what should we do with respect to people who, despite our most earnest entreaties, insisted on, people, meaning students and faculty, insisted on crossing the picket lines and going going into class. And the SDS said, physically prevent them by whatever means necessary. And some of us said, wait a minute, have you forgotten that we're on strike, among other things, against the university's use of coercive tactics? And haven't you ever heard of civil liberties? If students and faculty want to cross the picket line, as misguided as we may think they are, they're entitled to. That made us the right wing of the strike committee. That was our opinion. In any event, I'm very glad to be here. As Rusty mentioned, I did not support the Defense Appropriations Bill, despite the fact that it had some rather good things in it and something, because it contained funding for Afghanistan. I do not believe that the United States, I think we're fundamentally misguided in Afghanistan. I'm going to read a statement I wrote a while ago because that way I will make sure I don't skip something I want to say, but then I'll go ahead with it again. I am not convinced that the United States and its allies will be able to end the 35-year civil war in Afghanistan, nor is that our responsibility. We should not send additional troops to prop up a corrupt government which neglects its own people's needs. It is simply not justifiable to sacrifice more lives and spend more money on this war. We must rethink our policy in Afghanistan. We should in fact pull out of Afghanistan. If we do not, we are doomed to failure and to further loss of American lives. In late 2001, we undertook what I thought was a justified military action in Afghanistan in response to the attacks of 9/11. And with moral clarity and singular focus, we destroyed the al-Qaeda camps, drove the Taliban from power, and pursued the perpetrators of mass terrorism. I supported that action. But since then, our presence in Afghanistan has become counterproductive. We are bogged down amidst a long-standing civil war between feuding Afghans of differing tribes, classes, and regions whose goals have little to do with our own. Our very presence in Afghanistan has fueled the rising insurgency and emboldened those who oppose foreign intervention or occupation of any kind. In fact, it has been said by some astute observers that we are fighting not only nationalism in Afghanistan, but what has been dubbed valleyism. That is to say, we will oppose invaders from wherever, from the next continent or the next valley. We are focused on our valley. There's never been a really cohesive sense of nationalism in Afghanistan, and the writ of the Kabul government has never run throughout the country. And you're a foreign invader from 20 miles away, not to mention from 5,000 or 10,000, whatever it is, miles away. In seeking security and stability in Afghanistan, we have supported and enabled corrupt leaders with interests out of sync with the interests of ordinary Afghans. By backing the Afghan government, we have further distanced ourselves from the Afghan people and empowered the insurgency. If our mission in Afghanistan, what is our mission in Afghanistan? If that mission is indeed to prevent the safe harbor of terrorists within a weak or inhospitable nation, that is to say, to prevent the use of places in Afghanistan from being used to plot mayhem against us here, that mission is largely accomplished, since we are told by the CIA there are now fewer than 100 al-Qaeda personnel in the entire country. By the same logic, and I said this on the floor of the House back in December, or back in September, whatever we voted on that, I hesitate to repeat it now. By the same logic, we should send troops to Somalia, Eritrea, and Yemen. And say, I hesitate to repeat it now because when I said that, I meant it as a ridicule. Someone now might think gee, we should send troops to Somalia, Eritrea, and Yemen. Clearly we should not. In reality, terrorist plots can be hatched anywhere, in any nation, including our own. In fact, much of the planning for the 9/11 attacks took place in Western Europe, and the training largely took place in the United States at flying schools here. This does not mean we should stop pursuing terrorists who are menaces to us, obviously. We should continue the multi-pronged efforts to dismantle, disrupt, and destroy their ability to harm the United States. We should continue to track and block terrorist financing across the globe, increase intelligence activities focused on terrorists, increase diplomacy to rally other countries to our cause against terrorism, and if necessary, and if we find specific bases that are being used to plan terrorist attacks in the United States, we have the right to use our armed forces to attack those bases. But that is a function quite distinct from using our military power to try to secure a nation, to remake it, to rebuild it. Rebuilding Afghanistan is both beyond our capability and beyond our mandate to prevent terrorists from harming the United States. Frankly, it's none of our business. The Afghans should solve their own problems and build their own nation. That's the statement that I made on the floor at the time. Let me say this. We are the target of very loosely organized, increasingly loosely organized Islamic jihadist groups. Al-Qaeda, Shabab in Somalia, various other groups. And we have to prevent them from attacking us, and we have to prevent them from committing mayhem here. I do not believe that that requires, or frankly permits, our conquering other countries. It doesn't make any sense at all. You get into mission creep. Originally we went into Afghanistan because Al-Qaeda had major bases there. We eliminated those bases. We eliminated most of the Al-Qaeda people from Afghanistan. So now we suddenly get the mission of stabilizing the country. That country has not been stable in recorded history. The Soviets intervened in Afghanistan in 1979 because of an already ongoing civil war, and they intervened to support the pro-communist side. That civil war is still going on. Alliances shift, tribes, clans, groups shift their allegiances, shift their alliances. It is not our job to decide who governs Afghanistan. It is our job to make sure that if someone tries to attack us from Afghanistan, we can stop it. But the fact is that if you really look at the nature of the danger to us, it's not that some Afghani tribe or warlord is going to invade the United States. It's that some terrorist group is going to commit a terrorist act in the United States. But how do you prevent those terrorist acts? Well, you need real intelligence. When the German police take down a cell in Hamburg, that prevents mayhem in New York, and that is very important. So we need allies. We need allies to use their intelligence and their police work. Most of the war on terrorism, and I hesitate to use that phrase, is not in fact a military war, it's a police war. It's an intelligence war. And when we arrest someone, or when the Germans arrest someone in Hamburg, or we arrest someone elsewhere, that may be progress, and find out when they're trying to attack us here. But and that includes Afghanistan or any place else. But as I said, the attacks on 9/11 were planned in Hamburg and trained in the United States. And yes, there were camps in Afghanistan, but frankly, those attacks would have happened without the camps in Afghanistan. So it is fruitless and frankly not bright to try to rearrange the politics of a whole country, which you can't do in any event. And our very presence there, as I said, encourages an upsurge of nationalism fighting the foreign invaders.